We've been told that fat is the enemy, right? So we cut it out of everything. We went on low fat, no fat diets. But here is the truth. The low fat, no fat diet didn't come out of the health industry. And it was definitely not backed by solid science. And you know what? It may be one of the key reasons why so many of us are struggling with our weight and with our health. If you're over 55 and you're still avoiding fat in your diet, this video is going to change your life for good. So as a qualified nutritionist, I've been really worried about this focus on low fat, no fat. So where did this craze come from? Well, it came from the sugar industry. So in the 1960s, the sugar industry wanted to increase their sales of sugary products, and they commissioned research. Well, it was research, but it wasn't science. But they commissioned research to indicate that sugar isn't bad for you, but fat is. And we've believed that myth. We have for decades now. I mean, this goes back to the 1960s. For decades, we have been believing that low fat, no fat diets are healthier for you. Now, if you watch my video on sugar, you'll know that this can't have been a healthy focus, right? Sugar is fine, fat is a problem, because it is actually one of the key factors that has contributed to the obesity crisis. It, in most people, will lead to insulin resistance, because to make products, low fat or no fat products, taste better, more sugar needs to be added. And that causes all sorts of problems for the body. So let's look at why your body needs fat. Well, one thing that we probably all know, which is what has been the focus on the research to say you shouldn't have, one of the reasons the focus has been on reducing fat in the diet, is that your body uses fat as energy. And yes, it contains gram for gram more calories than protein and carbohydrates. But for your body to break it down and make and use it, it is much harder. So there's actually using energy to break it down and make it usable, instead of a particular carbohydrate and sugar energy, which is used really, really quickly. But that's used for a lot more things than just energy. Energy is one of the least important ones. So what else does our body need fat for? And we talk about both saturated and unsaturated fat, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. One of the key reasons that you need fat in your diet is that the body uses fat for cell membranes, for building cell membranes and for repairing cell membranes. So fats are a key element of all the cells in your body. And and a lot of this fat needs to come from your diet. Your body cannot produce fat. So it needs at least some of the fats it can't produce, and not in enough quantities. And you create new cells all the time. You have damage to cells all the time. And so this key building block needs to be there for healthy cells. Another key reason why you need to have fat in your diet is that there are some key vitamins that are what we call fat soluble. So the only way that your body can absorb them and use them is with fat in your diet. Other vitamins are water soluble, so you just need lots of liquid. So some key vitamins like A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K, they require fat to be able to be absorbed. So no fat in your diet means no absorption of these key vitamins, which leads to vitamin deficiencies. Fats are also a key element in the production of hormones. And one of the hormones that I want to focus on is leptin. Now, leptin is a hormone that is triggered when when the contents of your stomach contain a certain percentage of fat and a certain percentage of protein, and it needs to be in the right sort of combination. Now, what leptin does is it tells your brain that you are full. So if you do not have fat in your diet, or very limited fat in your diet, that hormone leptin doesn't get produced, and so there is no message going from your stomach to your brain that you are full. And that means you eat more, because if you still feel that you haven't had enough to eat, and if you still feel sort of hungry-ish, then you keep eating. So without fat in your diet, you eat a lot more, which is one of the reasons why after this fad of low fat, no fat diets came in, that we actually became heavier, and where we got more and more obese. Now, you probably have heard about saturated fat and unsaturated fat. So saturated fat is mostly from you get from animal products. Dairy is a good example, but also if you have some meat or chicken, that will have some saturated fat in it. And then there are unsaturated fats, and those are fats that come from things like olive oil, avocado, so nuts and seeds, and fish, so omega-3 fatty acids. Now, the focus has been on, if you have to have fat in your diet, it better be unsaturated fats. And yes, they are very healthy for you, and we need a lot of it in our diet. But that shouldn't come in as an alternative to saturated fat, because saturated fat has some specific roles to play in the body. One of the things that your body needs saturated fat for is for the cells to communicate, so the outside of the cell to communicate with the inside of the cell. So a lot of communication needs to go back and forth for that cell to do what it needs to do, wherever that cell is. And without saturated fat, that is simply not possible. So you get these inside of the cell where a lot of processes happen, partly energy production, partly DNA formation, doesn't know what's going on in the world outside the cell, and so it will not do what it needs to do when it needs to do it. Another reason why you need saturated fat, and this was shown in some really interesting research, proper science this time, is that we need saturated fat for our bodies to produce white blood cells. Now, white blood cells, you probably know, are a key part of the immune system. So less white blood cells means that we're more susceptible to in particular things like autoimmune diseases, and not being able to fight off viruses and viruses in particular, because it affects lymphocytes. It even is needed to help fight off tumors. So this bad rap that saturated fat gets is really ignoring the fact that it plays a key part in your body, and in some cases fighting off potential tumors. And another study showed that without saturated fats in your diet, your heart can develop lesions, and lesions are never good anywhere, because it damages the organ where the lesions are. So if we do need saturated fat, what sort of saturated fat do we need? Well, we need it from whole foods. The problematic part of saturated fats that we all talk about, and where really the low fat, no fat diet went in the health in the medical world, was in processed foods. So anything that has been made elsewhere in a factory and that you can buy almost ready to go, or we're talking about biscuits, and we talk about bread, supermarket bread, and we talk about sauces and condiments, also talk about fried foods. All those are not the healthy saturated fat, because they are often what's called hydrogenated, so they become problematic. But whole food fats like butter, the little bit of fat that you find in when you have a steak or you have some chicken, if you don't eat enormous amounts of it, you actually get enough saturated fat from those whole foods. The other thing to look at that is high in saturated fats are palm oil and coconut oil. And coconut oil in particular, it's a plant-based oil, which is unusual that it isn't unsaturated. It's saturated, but it's called short chain or medium chain molecules. So they're not really quickly broken down, but they're also not really long and takes a long time to break down. And they are very healthy saturated fats. Another good source of saturated fats is eggs. Now, eggs have had this really bad rap for years, and when it comes to saturated fat, almost immediately there's a connection made with cholesterol, and I will very soon make a video about cholesterol. So if you have, if you know you have high cholesterol, this is something that you want to watch out for, because spoiler alert, it's not the cholesterol necessarily that is the problem, and there's something else that makes cholesterol difficult in the body. But I'll talk more about that going somewhere in the future. Not too far ahead, I promise. About 4 or 5 videos out, I think. I don't know the schedule that I've come up with so far. So, healthy whole food produce and healthy whole food foods like eggs and butter and good quality meat. You don't have to go full fat meat, but you also don't have to avoid it, because I don't know about you, but I don't like chicken breasts because I find them way too dry. I eat chicken thighs. Now, not every day and not a lot, but that always comes with a little bit more fat, which makes it nicer to eat. It doesn't become so dry, but also because that is fat that is needed in your body. And then how much saturated fat should you have? When you look at the total intake, now this is a tough one to work out, so just give it a sense of a rough estimate of your diet. I don't want you to go and try and measure how much fat you have in your diet, but what you're looking for is that about 1/4 of the total fat in your diet should be saturated fat. So 3/4 should be unsaturated fat. So we're talking about the unsaturated fatty acids, nuts and seeds and avocado, olive oil, fatty fish, and then 1/4 should be saturated fat. So that is so there's your dairy, eggs, and what you get from meat. That also shows you that you should have a very small amount of meat in your diet. You can have some meat in your diet, but it shouldn't be huge. So, to recap, fat is really not the enemy. Fat in your diet is not the enemy. Sugar is, because it's used as a replacement for fat to make things palatable, but really you actually need it for health. And I really worry that we have created health issues, including obesity, but also if you think about diseases like Alzheimer's, where there's damage in the brain cells. Well, a big part of that is probably because there's not enough fat for some people, there's not enough fat in the diet to do the signaling between the inside and the outside of the cell. We don't have enough fat to repair the membrane around the cell when they are damaged. We don't have enough fat to create new cells. So all these potential diseases that we now worry about, especially as we get older, they have, for many of us, partly foundation in this low-fat, no-fat diet. So by switching away from anything processed, by reducing sugar in your diet, and watch the sugar video that I did before, you will improve your health. Now, I want you to trust that whole foods are healthy. It's what we're designed for to eat, and it will definitely improve your overall health. And I want you to trust your body. You will start to feel better when you eat real food. So does this resonate at all with some of the things that you grew up with about what diet should look like and what fat is like? And are you still having your low fat or no fat dairy, your super lean meat? Are you avoiding anything? Are you still not eating eggs? Think about it. These are whole foods. Your body is perfectly capable of processing them and using them as it's needed. You will feel better when you include more fat in your diet. About 25% of what you eat should be fat, to summarize, and then 25% of that fat should be saturated fat. So go back to butter, and don't do margarine, because that is a processed fat. Really not healthy. All right, I hope that was insightful, and thank you for watching. If you like these videos, make sure you subscribe, because I regularly talk about health and nutrition, and then when I do, you get a notification that there's a new video out. So thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.